Hello, I'm JW, and more failed electrical products, or maybe not failed, because this didn't turn out quite the way it was intended. Now, the particular item in question is this thing, which is an insect repeller thing, and essentially it's supposed to emit ultrasonic sound waves, which apparently are supposed to repel insects. Now, whether or not that works or not is another story. But the person who sent this in is actually Peter in Belgium, and he actually got one of these, and it turned out it didn't fit into the sockets in his house. And the reason for this is because the product that he received had actually been manufactured incorrectly. Now, for those who don't live in Europe and are not familiar with the sockets used, this is the sort of typical style. And there's a couple of these. There's the one there with the actual earth pin in the socket there, and that's the one that's used in Belgium and I think France as well. And then there's also another kind, which is this one over here. Essentially it's the same pin arrangement, but you've just got the earth on these clips at the top and bottom. So that's pretty much the standard deal as used throughout most of Europe. And if you look at an angle there, the point about these is that they're significantly recessed. So of course the plug has to actually go in there, and then of course the pins go in the holes at the back. Now I'll just show you the two on the website where this product came from, and there are a couple of designs which you can get. Now these are both on AliExpress, and of course came directly from China, and you'll see they're incredibly cheap, only so $2.60 or so there for the item, and that includes free shipping as well. Now you couldn't actually post that item within the UK for that price, never mind the actual item itself, so this again has come directly from the China supplier. Now if you look on this one, you've got the two round prongs there, and you see that the piece of plastic between the sort of prongs and the body of the device is incredibly short. And of course this means that when you attempt to put it into the recessed socket, the pins don't actually reach the contact, so you can't actually install it. And there is actually a warning on one of these which tells you about this, but really, of course, it shouldn't be made in that format in the first place. And then there's another one, which is this one here, and this is far worse. You see, it's got the same two pins, but they're on this huge big block of square plastic. So effectively, there's absolutely no way you could get the pins anywhere near the socket, and of course, that wouldn't fit in either. So of course, there'd be no way to actually use the device because the pins simply don't reach the electrical contacts. Now the one we were supposed to get was going to be one of those with the big square block on the back, and obviously it wouldn't fit into the European socket, but for whatever reason, either the manufacturers have identified this problem or we were just sent something else. We've actually received this one, and it's the one with the actual piece on the back there to go into the socket, and it's actually longer than the one shown in the other picture. Now this does just about fit into these sockets here. It fits into the, of course, the Belgian socket perfectly fine. It sort of fits into the other one, but only just. It's sort of right on the limit of the contacts there, so it probably does work, but the slightest knock, and obviously it's fell out on the floor. So it's still not a very good design, and the main reason is that these types of plugs, which are called Euro plugs, the actual plug itself is normally a very long and thin, tapered thing of that shape, and of course that fits in fine. So the fact they've got this on this big chunky plastic body is a bit of a fail, but it certainly appears that the manufacturer or manufacturers have changed this design a few times in an attempt to get it to fit into the socket it was designed to fit into. But nevertheless, we'll still have a look at the item and find out whether it works or not, and definitely have a look inside. Now here's the thing, and as you see, it's just got those two pins of the sort of Euro plug style. I say style because they're not actually the right shape, because the ends are not correctly sized. They should be slightly larger than that, and these are normally a bit flexible, so they can fit into a variety of sockets. And the depth of this part here on this particular one is actually 16 millimeters, which is just about long enough to fit into the sort of this type of socket here we've got, but unfortunately not quite deep enough there, so it's got that extra ring on the outside. That one is actually well, 16 millimeters depth. This particular one, however, is nearly 20, so it sort of fits in there, but not particularly well. And I say the one that Peter had was considerably shorter here and didn't fit at all. And obviously if it had that big black, or rather big square block of plastic there, then of course it wouldn't have fitted into any socket. So a bit of a fail there in the design. Now I can actually use this adapter here to plug into a UK one. It does fit in here reasonably well. So this is just an adapter, so it's not too bad there, but anyhow. So rating on the device then, let's just have a look there. So input voltage is 100 to 240, so pretty much any old voltage. Input power is less than 2 watts. and the output audio is 20 to 65 kilohertz. Now, you would hope it's not going to be in the 20 kilohertz range, because that's certainly the upper end of human hearing, and although plenty of people won't be able to hear in there, some people obviously can, certainly the younger individuals. And on the front here we've got Pest Repeller electromagnetic. I have no idea what they're on about there, because purely it's just going to be an audio signal. I don't really see where the magnetic part's coming from. And of course, whether insects and mice are repelled by ultrasonic sound in the particular sound range is another matter entirely. So let's see if it actually works, and whether it sets on fire when we actually plug it in. So I've got the power here, and so I use this adapter because it's just a bit more convenient than those large sockets there. So let's just plug in here and plug in there and see what goes wrong. Right, well there we go. So certainly can't hear anything, and we've got this LED which seems to be pulsing on and off. Well, that's interesting. Touching the device seems to make it emit various sounds. I'm not sure whether that's showed on the camera or not, but yeah, in fact it just seems to be wholly dodgy and loose in the adapter socket we've got. So even though it appears to fit fairly well, the connections are definitely a bit dodgy there. So let's just unplug that. Some kind of sound came out of it then, and see what's inside the horrendous thing. Power wise, I'm not going to bother measuring the power because it's sub 2 watts, so it's going to be rather difficult to measure things down at that very low level. Now, before we get too far, we're just going to short out these pins onto this metal rule here, because there may be capacitors and things inside that store charge. We don't want to be poked by those. Now, in terms of what's inside here, then presumably some kind of oscillator. We've also got some kind of sounder or speaker thing on the front there, and of course the green LED. Now, it is actually with normal screws, it appears, so I should be able to undo it. Bearing in mind these things are only sort of $2 or $3, free shipping. There's not going to be a lot in them anyway, simply for the fact that they only cost $2 or $3. So, and there's no weight to the thing at all. So it's basically just a plastic case. So let's see what we have. So what we've got then looks like one of these Piezo Transducer things, just wires tacked over. A lot of extra holes there, presumably for some kind of ventilation. And a little LED at the top there, they're just wires just tacked on, and the leads flapping in the breeze. Single chip here. This looks pretty old type technology. It's all through-hole stuff. Single capacitor. That's probably a bridge rectifier. Another large capacitor there, and a few other bits and pieces. A little capacitor there, a few resistors, and another small capacitor, and presumably a transistor. And that's pretty much it. Now this appears to be just sort of heat staked down into the casing, so that's not going to come out, but doubtful there's anything on the other side other than the circuit traces, so not much point going there now. Let's see what this chip is. So here's a bit of a better view of the circuit board there, and indeed just a bridge rectifier. Now the chip in here, right, so it's an NE556, which is basically a 555 timer, but I believe there's two in the same package there with a common power supply. So there's your oscillator, of course. Quite why they need two of them, something of a mystery, because of course one would do the job just fine. There's a part here for some missing components, which they also haven't bothered to fit in. Some kind of resistor and a 3-pin device at the top there. So basically it's just going to be a square wave oscillator, hence the various resistors. And look at the actual angle of some of these components. I mean, that resistor's sort of poked up in the air there, and they're sort of miles from the board in some places, and that one's rammed down in the hole. So pretty poor. And also notice the differences in size. You've got these sort of smaller ones here, and then got these larger ones over there. So it looks like constructed with any old random components that just happen to fall out of the cupboard. Capacitor there, 470 microfarad, 16 volts. So just the bridge rectifier there, and we've got this here, which is presumably for the inputs, to reduce the input current or whatever. Let's see, maybe 22, 400 volts. So well, that's not too bad, I suppose, on a main supply. That's the kind of voltage you would want. So what's 22? Presumably 22 nanofarad, presumably. Anyway, so not a great deal in there. What sort of wiring we got here? These are incredibly thin wires here going over to the LED flapping in the wind. I presume that's just poked in there. But yeah, we'll just pull out of there fairly easily. And then we've got the transducer, probably just one of these piezo things glued in. And the mains comes in on these black wires, which admittedly are slightly thicker. There's no fuse or anything, of course, it's just straight in the board at those 2 points. Now I've just pried the circuit board out, basically just heat stake down. We've basically got a plastic peg it pokes through, and then it's just melted with some hot object, soldering iron or some other thing, and just holds it in place. So just chipped those off, and of course that's expected on the back, nothing at all, just the various traces for the circuit. So it's pretty old sort of technology, all through-hole stuff, and nothing at any real cost in here, of course, not that you would expect there to be for only $3. So even the 205 timer is one of the cheap things you can get, and obviously the rest are just basically a few resistors and capacitors. What sort of brand is this capacitor? Probably unknown. And Kiang, apparently. Kiang vent, 105 degrees Celsius, low ESR. Is that so? Well, we'll measure that later and find out. And then this little one over here, 25 volts and 22 microfarad, CIFA, registered trademark apparently. Well, and again that's 105 degrees as well apparently. Let's just see if we can power this up and then get some kind of idea what kind of frequency this is outputting, assuming it's putting anything out at all. Now here's the dubious test arrangement. So mains voltage is in here, circuit board there, and then I've got the probe here connected to the centre of the piezo transducer, and then the negative is essentially that other connection there, though I've done it on the board because it's just easier than trying to get in there with the actual clip. And this lead goes up to the oscilloscope, which is on the shelf above, so we'll just change that view and have a look at that and see what kind of output we've got. Now this is the output we get on the oscilloscope here, and as you can see it's a rather strange waveform. It's sort of roughly a square wave, but seems to be varying in both amplitude and frequency as well. I'll just shade that with the book there, it might be a bit easier to see. Now this device claimed it was an output from 20 kilohertz to around 60, so it seems to be covering a certain range there. Now in terms of settings here, the volts per division we're actually on 20 millivolts per division, so I'll sort of alter that there. It's sort of in the region of at the maximum it's around 2.5 divisions, so it's going to be around sort of 50 millivolts or so, sort of peak to peak there. And in terms of timing here, we're actually on 10 microseconds per division. And if we just adjust this so we get this sort of in a reasonable area on the smallest interval there, obviously we're looking around sort of 3 divisions for the whole waveform. And at the maximum, sort of trim that in a bit at the beginning. Then again we're looking at about, well, 5 or so. Yeah, it's about 5 divisions on the, or 50 microseconds. So frequency-wise, we're talking about between 20,000 hertz and about sort of 33,000 or so, 3 kilohertz. So yes, the minimum is about 20, and the maximum here only appears to be about 33. But given the various components in there, they're not going to be very particularly high tolerance, so fairly likely to drift all over the place. Now, whether, of course, this thing is any good at repelling insects is another story entirely. And you see the waveform there, there's a considerable amount of other distortion going on there on the top here. So a rather strange device altogether, though basically it's just a square wave output at between 20 and 33 kilohertz. And this sort of pulsing effect does sort of tie in with the pulsing of the LED as well, so I presume it's just driven off the same circuit, but quite why it has that pulsing arrangement is not clear. Now let's just see what happens when the power is disconnected, because you can actually hear the some audio coming out of the thing when that's done. So I'll just disconnect the power. That little red dot here, by the way, is just from the reflection of the camera, not obviously part of the what's on the associated screen. So just disconnect the power and see what we get. Well, there we go. They're not too surprising. It just sort of decays away, and obviously the frequency reduces as it does so. So not entirely surprising. So that's the electromagnetic Pest Repeller, which of course has no magnetic part in it at all. It's purely a Piezo Transducer and a modulated square wave oscillator. And whether of course it repels pests is another story, because certainly it outputs the ultrasonic frequencies as described, but whether those have any effect on pests is completely unknown. In terms of construction, it's not too bad. I mean, there's no fuse or anything, but bearing in mind it's all going basically straight through that capacitor. So unless that capacitor sort of failed shorted, which is exception likely, then nothing really is going to happen, because even if something else on the board was shorted out, the current's going to be massively limited by that large red capacitor anyway. And the board itself, it's not too bad. I mean, it could be improved a bit, but there's at least a reasonable space between the mains input and the other side. But I say it's only $22. Really can't expect too much for that. And quite why it has that weird sort of modulating frequency coming out of it is again a mystery. But maybe that is what repels the various pests, the sort of wasp and the mouse as shown on the front cover. So there we go, a fairly cheap device, but not quite as bad as it could have been, but certainly could be a lot better. So until next time, thanks for watching.